I'd like to talk to you about villains. Not villains in life or films or TV or books, but more specifically, villains that appear in the medium of video games. See, I would argue that video games, despite the fact that they are a very new medium for storytelling, offer the most compelling depictions of villains and bring certain dynamics to the illustration of these characters that film and books do not and cannot capture. Let me explain this further. I'd like to make a comparison between a film and a video game. The Dark Knight and Batman Arkham City. Now, both of these items are considered to be the pinnacle of their respective mediums in film and video games, and both have masterful portrayals of the story's main antagonist. Heath Ledger turns in one of arguably the greatest acting performances of all time as the Joker, and he was posthumously awarded an Academy Award for his portrayal of the character. In Arkham City, Mark Hamill is what many fans consider the most pure depiction of the Joker, and Hamill's voice work for the character is masterful. But I'd like to argue why I believe that Arkham City offers a more dynamic portrayal of the villain. This isn't saying that Ledger's portrayal of the Joker isn't fantastic, it is. It's just, I believe that the storytelling medium of video games offers a more impactful platform for the portrayal of the villain. The Jokers in both these stories cause untold amounts of chaos in their respective Gotham cities. Ledger's Joker causes millions of dollars worth of property damage, for example, and as viewers, we recognize that Batman should stop the Joker before he commits any more chaos. But in video games, this dynamic is different. When Hamill's Joker orders his armed thugs into the subway system or orders the torturing of medical practitioners that cannot cure him of his blood disease, we, as the player, are directly impacted by his decisions and have to change our methods of play because of it. The player is a direct victim of the Joker's villainy. We aren't just watching it in a movie, and therefore we feel more emotion towards the Clown Prince of Crime. He feels more dangerous and more, well, like a villain. This emotion is further compounded with the Joker's death. This isn't a character that we've been watching on a screen. This is a character we fought with personally, whether that be with him directly or his goons. The character is so evil yet so charismatic that both Batman and the player, in a very weird way, have a yin-yang-like connection to him and kinda like him. And therefore, we feel even sadder when he dies at the conclusion of Arkham City. The player's connection to the Joker illustrates more broadly why I believe that video games are a fantastic and underrated medium for storytelling in general. In a film or book, the reader is essentially an observer to the action of the narrative, even if that story is told in the first person. The reader or viewer, for all intensive purposes, is a third party, witnessing the protagonist face off against the antagonist. However, video games are different, as the player is the protagonist. There is no third party, unless your little brother is watching you play. But it's in less story-driven games that I believe villains in video games can really thrive, because there are none. Not written into the game's plot, at least. Let's look at one of my personal favourite video games, Civilization V. This 4X strategy game explores history, where the player can fight, build cities, and conquer other civilizations led by a slew of famous leaders that have existed throughout human history. Now, many of these leaders, from a historical sense, would undoubtedly be considered villains. People like Genghis Khan, Attila the Hun, and even the slave-owning George Washington are morally questionable characters. But this is why I love these type of games, because the leaders you might consider to be villains don't have to be the villain. The villain in your story forms organically as you develop your empire. If you pursue a highly aggressive strategy, you could easily find yourself in a war with Mahatma Gandhi and his Indian empire. Alternatively, play your cards right and you could form a devastating alliance with Attila the Hun. And that's what I love about video games and what I believe separates this medium from film or books or plays. In many games, like Civilization V, the villain is who you make it, and it might not be who you expect it to be. It isn't told to you by the author or screenwriter, it's up to you. Who will be the antagonist in your story? And I think, without getting too philosophical, this is how video games can mirror life. Life doesn't have a writer that decides who will be the antagonist in your journey, like in a book or film. It's up to you. Much like video games, it's about perspective. The people you meet, who you might consider the antagonists in your life, are not set villains in a pre-written novel. They form organically through the decisions you make in life. Now, just make sure not to piss off Gandhi.